Ezra and Nehemiah, Introduction. The book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah focus on two people, the priest Ezra and the layman Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah lead the Jewish people back to the homeland and back to observing the Mosaic law. This return is made possible by the Persian King Cyrus, who issues a proclamation addressed to the Jewish people to go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord. 1 Ezra 1:3. According to Ezra, Cyrus's proclamation was made in the first year of the king's reign. Cyrus's reign began after he had successfully defeated the Babylonians, who had deported the people of Judah by order of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, Ezra 3:2, is the main leader of the exiles returning to their homeland. Upon returning to Jerusalem, Zerubbabel organized his people to rebuild the temple, Ezra 3:8. The following chapter describes the Samaritans, people of the land, as offering to help Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple. But Zerubbabel rejects the Samaritans' offer, and they in turn retaliate by sending a letter to the Persian king Artaxerxes, likely Artaxerxes I, 465-424 BC. The letter warns the king that if he allows the Jewish people to rebuild Jerusalem's temple, city, and walls, the Jewish people will eventually stop paying taxes to Persia. Ezra 4:11. Heeding this warning, the king ends the restoration of the temple, city, and walls. God then inspires the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, Ezra 5:1, to tell the people to start rebuilding the temple. Heeding the prophet, Zerubbabel once again leads his people in rebuilding the temple, even without official permission from the current king Darius. Eventually, by appealing to a decree of King Cyrus, Zerubbabel receives permission from King Darius to rebuild the temple and city. Supported by King Darius, Zerubbabel ensures that the temple is rebuilt, dedicated, and Passover is celebrated. Ezra 6. Ezra. Years later, the Persian king Artaxerxes writes a letter to the priest Ezra, Ezra 7:12. The letter grants permission to Ezra and any of the sons of Israel or their priests or Levites, Ezra 7:13, to return to Jerusalem and offer worship to God, lest his wrath be against the realm of the kings and his sons, Ezra 7:23. In the 7th year of King Artaxerxes, Ezra returns to Jerusalem with several families, and once there, Ezra instructs and exhorts his people to be faithful to the Mosaic law. One essential way Ezra ensured observance was by requiring the Jewish men who had returned from exile to leave their non-Jewish wives. Bergsma and Petrie argue that Ezra issued this harsh order because of his strong sense of social justice, and I quote, "It was primarily the upper classes of Judean society, officials, chief men, priests, and Levites, Ezra 9, who were intermarrying with non-Jewish inhabitants. Furthermore, the choice of the leading male citizens to marry non-Jewish wives left devout Jewish women without eligible spouses, facing a painful choice between a life of practical widowhood or marriage to a foreigner, and the resulting loss of religion, culture, and family identity. High-born men were placing their own personal interests above that of their community, and especially of their women. It is a naive imposition of modern categories to think the marriages of the Jewish leaders with foreign women was the result of romantic attachment. Instead, such marriages were contracted for political, social, and economic reasons, most likely to ally upper-class Jews with the leadership classes of surrounding peoples, creating an intermingled elite ruling caste for the entire region. The losers in this arrangement would be the common Jews and those who took seriously to worship the Lord according to the Mosaic covenant. In traditional societies, marriage is a public institution with important social justice consequences for the entire community. Nehemiah. In the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, Nehemiah 2:1, Nehemiah is serving as a cupbearer to the king. Upon being served wine by Nehemiah, the king asks, "Why is your face sad?" Nehemiah 2:2. Nehemiah then tells the king that he is sad because his beloved city of Jerusalem is in ruins and he wishes to rebuild it. Nehemiah 2:5. The king graciously respects Nehemiah's desire, appoints him governor of Judah, and sends him to Jerusalem to rebuild its walls and restore the city and temple. In Jerusalem, Nehemiah oversees the rebuilding of the Jerusalem's wall. He also collaborates with Ezra in assuring that the people know the Mosaic law, and they read from the book, from the law of God clearly, and they gave sense so that the people understood the reading, Nehemiah 8:8. Helping the people to understand the reading likely meant translating the Hebrew original of the Bible into Aramaic, since while the Jewish people were in captivity in Babylon, they had adopted Aramaic, the language of their oppressors. This was reflected also in the alphabet that was used by the Jewish people. Prior to the Babylonian captivity, a similar but different alphabet, the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, was used. During and after the Babylonian captivity, the Aramaic alphabet was used by the Jewish people. In restoring Jewish culture, Ezra and Nehemiah encouraged the Jewish people to repent from breaking the law and make an amendment to follow the law without grieving, since joy of the Lord is their strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Pronounced joy is described as taking place within liturgical celebrations. For example, when Ezra instructs the people to keep the Feast of Booths, the people do so with very great rejoicing. Nehemiah 8:17. Booths, also known as tabernacles, Sukkot, is a feast in which the Jewish people live in quickly made booths as a reminder of their ancestors' flight out of Egypt and into the desert. At the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, as in the time of the exile, the Jewish people were economically poor, almost powerless politically, and experienced few creaturely comforts, and yet surprisingly, they rejoice. The reason for the joy, comments Bergsman Petrie, was due to the remembering the past not with resentment, but with gratitude for God having repeatedly rescued them from difficulties. In addition, the joy was due to the Jewish people's hope that someday in the future God will save them in a totally perfect manner. The most suitable place for joyful gratitude for the past and joyful hope in the future is, affirms Bergsman Petrie, the liturgy, since this liturgical experience was and is a privileged moment when heaven and earth kisses, when time meets eternity, when those celebrating experience the eternal now of God who encompasses and transcends past, present, and future. Benedict XVI provides another explanation that well applies to the Jewish people's joyful liturgical celebration of the law. In reference to Cardinal Newman, Benedict teaches that true law is related to joy, since both are related to an experience of freedom. He argues that authorities who uphold true laws, which reflect the truth of God, are not a constraint on, threat to freedom, end quote, but rather are precisely the opposite. Obeying laws that reflect God's truth is to be a joyful experience, since such laws are in accordance with the truth inscribed by God in our very created nature, which reflects God's nature. The more these laws are followed, the greater inner freedom, experienced as peace and joy, is experienced as the actions of the creature becomes less and less alienated from, less in contradiction with how we have been created by God to live. After governing Judah for 12 years, Nehemiah 5:14, Nehemiah leaves Jerusalem to serve King Artaxerxes. This is followed by Nehemiah returning to Jerusalem and there discovering his people have returned to their unfaithful ways, including withholding tithes to the priest, working on the Sabbath, and Jewish men intermarrying with non-Jewish women. Bergsma and Petrie indicate that the sadness which the last chapter of the book of Nehemiah leaves the reader with is also mixed with an element of hope. Hope that one day the people of Judah will be able to follow the laws of the covenant. This ability to follow the law is prophesied by Ezekiel with, "A new heart I will give you, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will take out of your flesh the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." Ezekiel's prophecy, the Catholic Church teaches, is fulfilled in Jesus, who by taking our flesh while remaining God, has offered to all the possibility of loving with his divine heart, thinking with his divine mind, and abiding by his divine spirit. Only by relying on the grace of Jesus, the divine relationship that Jesus offers us, is the law, the truth that our minds, hearts, and souls at their deepest level want to follow, capable of being followed, and the result is deep peace and joy of living in accordance with our created natures.